welcome back to Monday. Monday is a fantastic day to get things kick-started. And, today I have someone who is very dear to me, Janice B. Gordon. She is from the UK. It's 7 p.m. their time right now. So I really want to thank her for coming on and talking to us about the next level, the next generation of leaders. So welcome, Janice.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here, Paula. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, we couldn't do this without you as well, because you are so impactful. You have your podcast going. You've got your Scale Your Sales company, all the things that you do. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, I'm an international speaker, consultant and trainer. I really focus on the customer. So I'm a salesperson that focuses on the customer, and you might think the two are counterintuitive. I remember when I was selling in the 1990s, cold calling, standing up. That's where I learned all my sales skills. It was in the mid 2000 that I started working with a customer experience consultancy. And that completely changed the way I thought about sales. So between those two things I did my MBA at Cranfield School of Management. But more recently, I've been working as a visiting fellow at Cranfield, working on helping leaders develop. So moving kind of mid leaders into senior leadership, and had quite a lot of success on that. So I'd be happy to talk to you about that. But really, sales is a leadership skill. You're influencing, you're not selling, you're influencing the relevant buyers and customers are relevant for your particular solution, but you're influencing them. And influence is really important in leadership.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, we all get boggled down with learning how the processes go, how to lead with ABCD charts, with data and all of that we're forgetting about those influencing possibilities that we need to do to raise our level of leadership. So what are you doing now in your fellowship that some of the things that you're doing to help those mid-level emerging high potential leaders looking to take that next step?
Well, when I did my MBA at Cranfield, the thing that attracted me to that management school, besides the fact it was one of the top in the world, was because of all of the personal development that they did. So all of the tools, psychometric testing, to really help you understand you. And this is absolutely fundamental in leadership. So I'm working with them now, and that has always remained core to their management training. Understanding you, that's the context that you can understand other people. You understand the nuances of using your voice, your music, your language, not to push, but to influence other people. So we're using tools like journaling. Journaling is a fantastic tool to help you to reflect on a situation. And I often say to the cohort and the leaders that I work with, imagine looking down on a situation that you've been through and you're reflecting on how it went, but you're reflecting on how it went from other people's point of view. And that's again a really important skill in sales, putting yourself in your buyers and your customers' shoes. As a leader, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the people you want to lead, see it from their perspective, and that will help you to change the language you use, the way that you use your language, so that you're very much on their terms rather than on your terms. So these are really important skills to understand that reflection allows you to replay scenarios in your mind. And then when you're in that situation again, you can replay that record and it's playing a different tune. It's playing your tune because you understand the nuances of that situation, that when you were going through it first time round, you're often only seeing it from your point of view. Second time round, you start to see the other side of the story. And that really helps with your negotiation and influence.
I love that. Now you're speaking my language, because reflection is so important. I used to do that when I would drive home from work. I would reflect on the day, what went well, what didn't go so well. How could I be a better leader to those that I serve? And, we're doing the same thing here in the United States. I work with the Harrison tool, learning to balance your leadership in a way that is unique to you. And I think that that is really what we talk about on the side A, side B, is bringing that both and approach into leadership, right? So
Absolutely.
if there is something that we can help serve our emerging leaders as organizations, right now, I believe our organizations are really doing a great job at developing them on the processes, the data, the understanding of, human nature, but not understanding who they are, who our new leaders are in as a human being. This is just where I think that unique style of leadership is so important to the diversity of the company and of thought. What is your take on that?
Okay, so if we're talking about the next generation of leaders that are already here, when we're thinking of, Y into Generation X and Z that's coming up, they're very quickly rising through the ranks. And what I find is that it's not so much that we need to adapt to them. I mean, they need to adapt to us, sorry, but we need to adapt to them, because we have to remember, I'm of the boomer, on the cusp of boomer Y generation. And we have to remember, my generation, your generation are in the old world. We have to learn all these things. Whereas if we're looking at the X and Z generations, they're already in the real world now. And the problem is we're a barrier. They come into the organizations, they speak in a different way, they have a different tone, language, and we're expecting them to adapt to us. But actually, they're in the real world, we're in the legacy world. We're wishing it wasn't changing, and they're the ones that are pushing for those changes. So they're speaking a whole new language that my generation, needs to learn. So I think the first thing is, let them off the leash. Don't be afraid. Suspend your fear. Stop saying that they're not doing it in the way you want them to do it. Actually say, I need to learn how they're doing it, because they're in the world that is now.
I love that. I absolutely love that, because we do need to let them off the leash. Now that I agree with you. I'm from that boomer generation as well, late boomer, early what was it, Y generation?
Yeah.
But no buts at all. That was just a word there, filler word. But I believe that we also need to come together to take that approach where we can learn from each other, right? And agree that letting them off the leash and letting them learn and be creative and innovative and really focus on those skills is what's going to scale a company high into the right? And that's really what organizations are looking for. So being innovative is letting those mid-level emerging high potential leaders really develop that strength of accountability, of kindness, of trustworthiness. And I think that we all need to trust each other so that we can balance this and really let them thrive. Would you agree?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. This is what I love about
The, the language was around what we need to do as in our generation. And yes, we need to work together. But I think the balance isn't that what we're in control. And I think the balance is that what I mean about letting them off the leash is that we're using analog measurements, key performance indicators. We're using all the old style language. We're in Beethoven. I love it. But it's not necessarily the same beat that we're running to now that's relevant. We talk about innovation. And so when we're looking at innovation, it often comes from new ways of thinking.
Yeah.
So the thing is, what we're asking the X and Z generations is to be innovative in an analog world. Well, that won't work. It just won't work because we're actually still forcing the old way, the old legacy systems on top of people that think in a completely different way. The language that they use, the short messaging that they use, and we think of spelling and grammar, all these things. I'm not saying it's not important, but as soon as we start putting these key performance restrictions and parameters in place, we're starting to reduce the innovation. And it's the innovation that we want, that new way of thinking. So I think we need to create different creative systems that allow the two generations to come together, but it's not the systems that the old legacy, my generation, would use. So that means my generation has to learn the new technologies in order to play in the same space.
I agree with you 100%. And I think that my conversation might have gotten a little distorted. When I talk about balance and coming together, I'm talking really about all those resume-based skills, balancing them with those emotional-based skills that we need to do so that we can dive in as our generation, dive in and help that next level of emerging leaders who are going to soar because of creativity, because they're bringing their whole self into work now. They understand the emotion-based skills that they need behind that. Whereas you and I, or myself, was I put your head down, let results speak for you. And that's not it anymore. It's about collaboration and all of those things. And I think we're going to see that, I said this in my book, which is interesting. How could we not think of this generation wanting to change corporate America at this point, or any job at this point, and the world, when they've watched movies and grown up with Harry Potter or the Hunger Games, which is all about showing how to change things, right? And that's, I think, where we as us can certainly work to transform ourselves to meet them where the emerging leader is, because they have so much room to grow. But I also think that they need that development on those emotional based skills as well, just like we all do, right? To bring that both and innovative, creative, and accountability approach.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I for the last 10 years in my business, I've taken on master students, interns. So they've interned in my business, and I've learned as much as they've, learned from me. I mean, I've helped them to ask for pay rises and, get into jobs that they never thought they would have. but they've helped me an awful lot to try and understand more about how the, you know, the X and the Z generation think, and the way that they think about the world and the communities they're in, social, digital, virtual communities that they're in, that is second nature, and the way that they build relationships. And I've learned so much from them, in that I've tried to not put my A side, that you and I have been brought up as that's the right way of doing things, that's the professional way of doing things, layer that onto them, because I think there's a natural sense of B already, and then often we can squeeze that out of them. And I think you're absolutely right, it's bringing the two generations, the A and the B, together and balancing it out in organizations. But you know, the organizations themselves are still on the A side. Yeah. You know, exactly. Which is what I was saying about a lot of the key performance indicators. But I do think that the generation X and Z have a lot of side B in them, and the language they use to describe their world is different. And I agree with you that in the social connection that we have, we're used to speaking face to face and presenting ourselves, and all of this has been taken online, which is the natural world, but the language is different, it's shorter messaging, you know, there isn't any grammar in it or anything like that. And when you know, the X and Z generation goes into the business world, they're still using the same language. So you're right, there is an adaptation on both sides to really appreciate side A and side B and balance the two. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you said that, because it is, I think it is really, I think we're stuck in an either or looking at it right now. You either do this or you go there, or you do this or you come here, rather than a both and approach. And that's really where I like to go, in understanding every part of it. And I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're saying that because language is different on all generations, really, that we just need to add context to what that language is, so that we can be aware, because something may be, you know, back in the 50s, it was cool to do this. And then in the 90s, it was tight. And then, you know, I don't know what it is now, but there are all these different words. And I think that adding context to those words and understanding them is amazing work we could be doing.
Do you know what? I think it's absolutely fascinating. I was actually thinking in my head, you are such a rock chick, you are. You are such a rock chick. But that was why I was smiling. But language is music, isn't it? Yes, we have words which are like the notes, and then the tone and the pace. And as you know, I'm an international speaker, and you can say a sentence using the same words, but depending on your pace, tone, and pauses, it can be either funny or thought-provoking, or you know, you killed the sentence in that no one got it really. Yeah. So it's really interesting. So it's not just the words, but it's the contents and the tone and the pace and how you use those words. And language is a tool of communication, and leadership is all about the way you communicate your influence, really, and doing it in an authentic way. And you wouldn't communicate in the same way, the same things to everybody, because everyone is uniquely different. But organizations, the way that they create policies, it's actually creating that uniformity, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's the thing that I think that we were talking about, you know, different generations. I think that's what other generations rub against. And when we're talking about the next generation going into leadership, I think that their attitude is very different. I met with an intern that's now living, she's got a job, she's living in Canada. She's originally from France. And she was telling me she's at a supervisory, lower management level. So I was asking about her aspirations in her life in general. Mm-hmm. And she's very much, and I think this is quite typical, is not really seduced by the leadership, by the ladder of career ladder, but actually thinks about, am I learning something now? Is it nurturing me now? I'm saving some money so that when I decide that it's not good for me anymore, then I've got enough money saved so I can go traveling, which is what I love. And when I'm done with that, then I'll get into another job. And it's not thinking about this career ladder is a kind of step moving up. I've got to stay with the company. Now, if you move around every year, then it doesn't matter, because there are so many jobs and not enough talents that they don't look at those things. In our day, then you had to be in a job for 2-5 years, otherwise you're not serious. Yes, exactly. The great resignation we're talking about now, post-pandemic, is actually what the why X generation's already on. That's their path. They're not taking these things quite so seriously. Life is serious, but work isn't the be all and end all that it used to be. So organizations need to do different things to attract the talent, but also being aware that talent isn't completely invested in the organization. Loyalty has been divorced from career now.
Ah, very interesting take. That I love that we're looking at things that career ladder has really kind of, went from wood to stainless steel to now being bendable and go every which way, just like any career that you can, maybe you're up on a ladder and you want to go to another one. You don't have to necessarily climb it. I love that. And yes, music is in my heart and soul, and lyrics are so important. And I think tone and tonality and having a pace or a beat is so important in that leadership communication, which is interesting because I did have someone ask me the other day, how do I, as a leader who is leading multi-generations, even some that are older than me, how can I do that without being favored this way or favored this way? It's very challenging to lead a multi-generational organization. What would you say on that?
So, so I didn't understand the question. Is it about favoriting some generations over another? Is that balancing those things?
That's a good question. I will clarify. And what she said is, how do I lead a department of different generations where going to dinner is favorable to some, but some just want a gift card to go home, or bringing the team together after work is not favorable to some. And it's interesting take on how do you, I don't want to say make everybody happy, but how do you get everybody involved and motivated at the same time by doing different programs?
Okay. It's interesting that everyone should be motivated at the same time, which goes back to company policies and structures being really rigid. And then if we're talking about everyone is unique and different, so everyone's going to have a different driver, a different thing that motivates them. So the job of a leader is to find out what that is and not treat everyone the same. So in the one-to-ones, in the coaching sessions that any leader should be doing with their team, they should be finding that out. They should be remembering that, because that's important. It's important to understand the person that you're working with in order to know how to influence them and how to support them. If you don't know those things, then you're not going to do a very good job in helping them to achieve their goals, that will also achieve the company goals. So what about asking the team? What about asking the team what their preferences are, and let the team decide, what 2 or 3 benefits they would prefer. And then they get a decision 6 months later that the team can organize what are the things that motivate the team. Because how can we decide for other people? Let them decide for themselves. 2 years later, the dynamics of that team may have changed. You may have 1 or 2 other people that have come in. But I think when it's not parents and child anymore in organizations, it's about collaboration. It's about, community. And so as a community, we would all kind of make a decision of what's in the best interest. And generally, people make what's in the best interest of other people, not just for themselves. And I think that's the thing that's changed with the generations that are coming up now in leadership.
You're spot on. And that's exactly what I was talking about, is you need to find out what they want to do, what each individual person, what motivates them personally and professionally, right? Because if you know that they want to travel, then that could motivate them to do the job that they need to do, right? Any of those things. But as a leader, it's not as a group anymore. It's individual. And you're spot on. It's like if I were to tell you your favorite song to motivate everybody was Bright Side of the Road by Van Morrison, not everybody would agree. And that's my favorite song. But that is not what everybody would agree to. So we need to understand what music is inside everybody and help them bring it out. Help people and leaders bring that out and to the forefront today.
I would totally agree.
Yeah. So we have just a few more minutes here. Is there one tip that you would love to get? I have so enjoyed this conversation. And
we'll have to do it again. This is great.
Yeah. And I love the back and forth, because what I said may not have been intentional and what you're hearing. And I love that, because it's all about language and context, right?
We always have a good conversation, Paula.
Yes, we do. Is there anything that you would like to share before you go? Anything you're coming up and doing, or anything that I put on there where people could visit you on LinkedIn? Is there anything else, Janice, that you would like to share?
I would absolutely love people to visit me on LinkedIn, Janice B. Gordon. But if you put Janice B. Gordon on Google, you're going to find all my channels, YouTube. But Scale Your Sales podcast is another great place to go. We talk about sales, but sales is the engine of all organizations. So we also talk about sales leaders and CEOs, revenue officers, what they need to do. So that's a great place to go.
Great. Well, sit tight for just a minute, and I'll be with you in a moment. Hey, I want to thank everyone. Janice B. Gordon, she is amazing, and I love our conversation that we did back and forth. So if you're looking to look for somebody who is in the UK or here that could be a keynote or learn a little bit more, she's the perfect person to look for. So until next week, continue rocking your talent, and I'll see you next week.